Salut! Time to discuss a slightly difficult grammar concept known as indefinite articles. Before we jump into exactly how this works in French, it's really good to actually know that you do use indefinite articles all the time in the English language, you just don't think about it. So, in English, the indefinite articles are the words a or an. They're considered to be indefinite, which means like not known exactly, because they can basically apply for any item. When you talk about wanting a book instead of the book, you're saying any old book will do. I don't need a definite particular book. I don't need the book that I left at school. I need a book. Any book will do. So basically these are the words a or an in the French language. Now here's the issue though. In English, the way you know whether to use a or an is you look at the word that comes after it, and if it starts with a vowel, then you have to use the word an, such as an apple, because apple starts with the letter A. In French, it's a little bit different. In French, the way you determine which of these articles that I'm showing you right now that you actually use, it does have to do with the word that comes after it, but it has to do with the gender or number of that word. Now, I know you're kind of thinking to yourself, gender. Well, what if I'm just talking about books and, like we were in the example? The thing that's very different about the French language than the English language is that every item in the French language is considered to be either masculine or feminine. And we've mentioned this briefly in a previous video, but if you hadn't caught on yet, whenever you made your list of classroom items, when you wrote an on, that UN word, in front of an item, it was because that particular item was masculine. We had several masculine items on our list, like un livre, a book, un cahier, a notebook, un garçon, a boy, is of course masculine. Now the thing that makes book and notebook masculine has nothing to do with the item itself. It's not that it has any kind of boy parts that make it more masculine. It's almost as if when they first created the French language and they decided to create the word for book and the word for notebook, that they flipped a coin and it happened to come up, you're going to be masculine from here on out. Now, you can play games with yourself as far as memorizing whether they're masculine or feminine, but there's no rhyme or reason to it. So whenever we take notes in class, you always want to make sure that you do jot down the article so that as we go further down the road, you're working not just on memorizing that the word for book is livre, but that livre, the word book in French, is masculine and has an an in front of it. So by the same turn of events, if you have something that has une, U-N-E, in front of it, it means that the item that follows is feminine. We had a couple feminine words on our list, such as une fenêtre, the word for window, une porte, the word for door, and I believe we also mentioned how you could have une professeur, a teacher who happens to be a girl. Again, there's nothing about door or window that make them particularly feminine. There's no body parts that make it feminine. It's just that ever since they've existed in the French language, they were determined to be a feminine gendered word. So this is not something you can compare to English, other than you know that an and une both mean a or an interchangeably, but the way you choose which one to use is based on whether the item you're using it with is either masculine or feminine, and the way you know whether an item is masculine or feminine is you literally just memorize it when you first learn the word. It's a matter of memorization, not a matter of logic or pattern or explanation. Sorry, it's just kind of how it is. Now, the word des, D-E-S, is actually really easy and logical to use because it gets used anytime something is plural. Plural means there's more than one of them. Now, usually that means that there's an S on the end. So instead of book, you have books. In French, instead of livre, you have livres with an S at the end. That's not always the case, and we'll get to that in just a second, but usually des means some, and anytime there's more than one, doesn't matter whether it's masculine, doesn't matter whether it's feminine, if it's more than one, it's got to be des because des means some. So let's go ahead and give you a couple of examples here. I've got the word garçon here, and if you'll remember from your notes, garçon is boy. So if you wanted to put an article before the word boy, and you have the choice between these three articles, either an or une, which means a or an, or des, which means some. If you just have the word boy, you're going to want to fill in the article un. Again, it's boy, so it's clearly masculine, and there's just one of them. So you're going to use un garçon for a boy. If, however, you add an S to that word garçon, you're going to be talking about multiple boys. So you can't say a boys. It doesn't work anymore. It doesn't make sense. You have to notice that there's an S there and know that it's plural, and your only option for an article whenever you have more than one of an item is to use des, D-E-S, garçon, for some boys. Same situation here in the center column, but now our topics are filles. Filles are girls. So this first one is just girl. Again, you would be wanting to say a girl if you were given the above choices. And because girl is clearly something that's feminine, you would use une fille. Whereas if you add an S to that and you're talking about girls, you can no longer say a girls. In English, we say some girls, and they do the same thing in French. That word for some, for something plural such as girls, is des. The column that usually gets everybody kind of tripped up is this third one, and that's because now we're getting away from the things that are clearly gendered, such as boys and girls, and we're getting into those items. So when you want to talk about poster, first thing you need to know is that poster is poster, singular. So you already should be thinking, okay, I'm going to say a poster. Now it's just a matter of looking it up on your notes. Poster happens to be a masculine word, so when you want to say a poster in French, you have to say un poster. Same thing with chaise. Chaise is chair, so right away you should be thinking, okay, I'm going to say a chair. The choice of whether to say un or une, though, is based on when you look up in your notes whether the word chair is actually masculine or feminine. If you look it up, you'll see that chair is feminine, so it's une chaise. Now there are some exceptions to this rule. These are typically the things that make people a little bit frustrated. So if you're feeling pretty good about this so far and you understand when to use un and une and des, please realize that these are exceptions to the rule. They're little teeny tiny details that if you're an A+ student, you're going to need to get these to continue to be that A+ student. If you're just kind of somewhere in the middle and trying to really grasp this concept, it might take you a while to totally remember to do these. So please don't get frustrated. The first exception I wanted to talk to you about are items or nouns that the plural is not formed simply by adding an S. And we have this in the English language. Basically, in the English language, if you have one fish, if you have two fish, it's still fish kind of thing. If you have a deer and you have multiple deer, it's still deer. If you have one goose, you don't have 5 gooses, you have 5 geese. So we have these same kinds of exceptions, but you've been hearing them your entire life. They seem a lot more natural to you. These are not going to seem natural. In fact, they're going to seem like a bit of a pain in the butt. So kind of stick with me here. If you have a noun or an item that ends in the letters E, A, U, and I've got 2 examples here for you from your notes. We have un tableau, which is the word for a blackboard or a chalkboard, and un bureau, which is the word for a desk. See how they end in the EAU? Instead of just smacking an S onto the end and making it tableaus and bureaus like your instincts would tell you, they actually add an S to the end, or X to the end rather, to make it plural. So if you want to say some boards, it's des tableaux with that X at the end. If you want to say some desks, it's des bureaux with that X at the end. Again, minor change, but something that you need to do so you don't walk around saying things like gooses, or at least its equivalent in the French language. The second one is there are a couple of items that never ever change, whether it's one or more than one. And that kind of takes me back to the example of one fish, two fish, that kind of thing. The 2 items from our list that never change are the words for CD and DVD. So whether you have one CD or you have some CDs, un CD for a CD or des CD for some CDs, you don't actually add an S to it. Same thing with DVD. Whether you have a DVD, un DVD, or you have some DVDs, des DVD, there's no S added to DVD. I imagine it's because it's technically an abbreviation for something, but either way, make sure you're never adding those S's to your CDs and your DVDs in the French language, even if you can in English. And then the last one, this is just a tricky one. This is not actually an exception to the rule. A lot of times when people see the 3 or 4 word phrases such as CD player, lecteur de CD, they don't exactly know where to add the S. So just to kind of clarify, if you have multiple CD players, it needs to be added to the players part. Realize this is a little bit backwards. It's a player of CDs. Again, they kind of order their sentences differently than we do. So in English, if you had multiple CD players, you would be adding the S to the word players. In French, you've got the S added to the French word for players, which is lecteur. That's not really an exception. It's just something that catches people off guard. The last big exception, and if you get nothing else, this is a very important one, is when you have pas in a sentence. We talked about this in the last video. Remember, there's those two magical words in the French language, ne and pas, that can make a sentence negative. Instead of saying there are certain items, it changes to there are not certain items. When you use those words in a sentence, besides magically making it negative, it can change your articles. And anytime you have the word pas, you cannot have it be followed by the word un, you cannot have it be followed by the word une, or the word de. Anytime you have the word pas in a sentence and you put it in there to make it negative, just like I told you, if you have it followed by an or une or de, you need to have something in your brain that reminds you that that does not jive in the French language, and instead you actually need to change it to the word de. So the example I have here for you is il y a des chaises. There are some chairs. If by chance, though, you wanted to change that sentence, maybe more accurately describe a room that does not have any chairs, so you put your ne and your pas in, just like we practiced from the last section, and you come up with that phrase, il n'y a pas, there are not, instead of il y a, there are. Normally, you would just go ahead and have des chaises, because look, chaises is plural, chairs is more than one, you got to say some chairs, it would be des. But this rule supersedes that. If there's a pas in the sentence, it's automatically got to be followed by de, which should really make your life easier. You see a pas, doesn't matter if it's masculine, feminine, plural, you ain't even got to look at the word after it. But it's something else extra that you have to remember, so do be careful with that. You do have 2 questions here to practice and get you ready for your daily video quiz next class. In the first one, remember each time you're looking at the word that comes after the blank. So the first sentence actually says, I have blank computer. What you need to know as far as how to fill in either the a or the some is you have to look at the word computer. Right away, when you see that it's just computer and not computers, you should be thinking about the word a. Remember the word a in French has 2 different versions, either un or une. The only way you know which one to fill in is you have to look up computer on your notes. The word computer, if you look it up, is masculine. So if you want to say I have a computer, you need to fill in on, masculine. If you had some trouble with number 2 because you first saw fenêtre, you looked it up on your notes, you saw it was feminine, and you filled in une, you are not alone. But don't forget about that exception we just talked about. Technically, you cannot have pas followed by the word une. No good reason to it, just something to annoy you as an English speaker learning French. But either way, that pas dictates the fact that you can never have any of those articles we learned earlier. They always have to change to de. So if you want to say that there is not a window, you need to say il n'y a pas de fenêtre is the correct article there. Go ahead and look back at your notes and jot down any questions you have, and I'll see you next class.